Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Bound by Grace podcast, where we explore the conversations that matter most, those that heal, restore, and transform. In today's episode, we're tackling a topic that sits at the heart of every relationship, whether it be marriage, a friendship, or family member: communication and de-escalation. How do we speak truth with grace? How do we respond, not react, when tensions rise? Joining me is Rodney Smith, a seasoned communicator and peacemaker. Rodney brings not only practical tools, but a deep understanding of how emotional intelligence and spiritual maturity can shift the atmosphere in even the most difficult conversations. Whether you're navigating conflict in your marriage or trying to stay grounded in a volatile world, this episode offers wisdom for the moments when words matter most. Let's dive into the art of listening, the power of presence, and the sacred work of peacemaking. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Amber. Thank you for having me on the show.
Absolutely. I'm so happy we were able to make this work. It took a little bit, but we finally got it scheduled.
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
So why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, whatever you're wanting to share?
Well, so my name is Rodney Smith. I've been in law enforcement for about 23 years now. And throughout my law enforcement experience, it's actually taught me a lot about active listening and communication. I started off as a patrol officer. I worked my way up to investigations. I even had an opportunity to become a polygraph examiner, which put me more directly face-to-face with interviewing, certain aspects of interrogation. I'm also a law enforcement trainer in several different aspects, and I'm a keynote speaker, and I recently wrote a book that I authored called I Can See What Your Body Is Saying, where we
that's cool.
look into micro-expressions and certain features of body language.
Very, very cool. I know that I told you I wanted to do maybe an episode with you where you kind of, I might bring a couple people on and have you kind of read them just to see how accurate you were. Because let me tell you, when you read me just off of my picture, that was crazy. Yes. Because it was so spot on, and it blew me away of how these little details, they can really tell you so much about someone.
Absolutely.
So it was pretty exciting. I kind of get geeked out on things like that. I don't know anything about them, but I feel like they're so cool. So with your background, I feel like you're the perfect person to tell us about de-escalation and effective communication, because in law enforcement, so I don't know if you know this, I don't think I told you, but my father was a police officer, my ex-husband was a police officer, and my brother-in-law and his brother were police officers, as well as my cousin who works for NCIS. So I have quite a bit of police background in my family, and that is a skill set. If you're going to be a good officer, communication is something that's essential.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more.
So I'm excited to dive in. So this is going to be for our listeners a little bit more of a conversational format. I don't have any questions prepared. It's kind of off the cuff, but we're going to test his knowledge and see where he takes us. So no pressure or anything, Rodney. But so let's start with maybe just communication as a whole. What makes a person an effective communicator?
Well, if I'll start by saying, when I first got into the law enforcement profession, I felt that I was a pretty good communicator, but I was not, in fact, a great communicator. And I quickly learned that communication is not just talking. It's not just words going back and forth. Communication, in order to be an effective communicator, there are so many dynamics that are taking place. Number one of the first things we have to do is pay attention, because it requires an individual's focus it demands our attention. And as far as when interacting with anyone, whether it's just in everyday general contact in the grocery store, whether it's in a relationship, whether it is even in a police interview, one of the first things that I have found has been very effective for me is active listening and showing eye contact. Those are two vital areas because I would say throughout my interactions and experiences throughout the years, and not just in law enforcement, but in life, in order to have an effective communication, there's so many different dynamics that take place. Number one, the individual that is providing information, we'll call them the messenger. They are sending information to the receiver. And then what happens is that receiver takes that information, processes it, and then gives feedback to the messenger. And if everything is going correctly in a cycle, then that should continue on and on and on and on and on. And that's one way of, number one, first building trust and rapport, because people don't want to have people will not and cannot have effective communication with you if they don't trust you, and if there's no type of rapport that is either being currently established or have already been established that I've found.
Okay, that makes sense. So some sort of level of trust is needed to effectively communicate. And then active listening is a big factor in effective communication.
Absolutely. And a lot of times what we call in active listening is the 80-20 rule. And that 80-20 rule is where they say we should be listening 80% of the time and responding 20% of the time. A lot of times, because the brain processes what we hear faster than what we see, it is not uncommon for individuals to want to finish your statement for you or interrupt you as you're still talking, because they have this perception that they already know what you're going to say before you actually complete your sentence. And so you think about it. How many times have you ever been telling someone a story, and as you're telling the story, they're interrupting you before you can actually finish your sentence? Or they interrupt you and then they go on a sidebar conversation and they talk so long that by the time that they finish telling their story and it's your turn to talk, now you've forgotten what you wanted to say. And a lot of times that just comes just out of human nature, because like I said, even as I'm talking right now, if I get to certain aspects of the sentence, or if I get to a certain part of my sentence and I say, I just don't know you might already say, oh, the words. You're trying to fill in the blank for me. And so because active listening like I said, it demands our attention and focus. That 80-20 rule comes into effect a huge amount of times, because human nature is, by design, we want to help people. We want to try to accommodate them in any way, shape, form possible in order to help them. But interrupting an individual can help destroy credibility and trust, as well as rapport in the beginning. So that 80-20 rule is really, really important, because no one wants to feel as though they're being ignored. Everyone wants to feel like, well, if I'm taking time out of my schedule to give you information, I would like for you to be able to give me good feedback after I'm finished talking, but not while I'm talking to you.
Yeah, I would say I am an interrupter. I hate that I do this, and I apologize for it consistently, because I know that it's not something that someone wants. But I get so excited that I'm even having a conversation, and then I can't help but say, oh my gosh, guess what happened? Or I feel like I'm going to lose my train of thought if I don't say it. So I have a very bad habit of interrupting. That is for sure. So I would not consider myself the best active listener.
Well, And once again, like I said, that's not uncommon. I think even for myself, as I started on patrol, uh, depending on the individual's temperament and their level of patience and their degree of patience, most of us just get to the point. Tell us what I need to hear in order to satisfy and help to be able to accommodate you. Uh, in other words, I don't need the long version. I need you to summarize it, tell me what I need to do, and then I'll give you the answer to help solve your problem or give you some advice or answer the question that you're presenting towards me. But unfortunately, if someone is willing to share a story or share information to you, it's our job to listen at that point. Another aspect of active listening that I have found is, and I'll get to more eye contact in just a moment, but being able to understand how a person thinks, learns, and communicates. Because
Mhm.
in order to effectively communicate with you, it's not about me. It's about me accommodating and being able to show that I'm mindful and paying attention to you. And one of the ways that I like to do that is as you conversate, I'm listening to key words and phrases that you may use because I would like to know what type of channel that you think, learn, communicate, and comprehend with. I would like to know if you're an auditory learner, a visual learner, or a kinesthetic and tactile learner. And the way that I do that is I listen to the different words that you'll speak throughout your conversation. So if you are a visual speaker or a visual learner, or you comprehend that way, you may say things like, I see what you're saying, or
Mm.
hey, look, I'd like for you to look at it this way. As opposed to an auditory learner, they may say, I hear what you're saying, or are you listening to what I'm telling you? They're letting you know the channels that resonate with them. Even our kinesthetic or tactile, a lot of these people, they'll talk with their hands a lot. They're more of the touchy feely. They may even say, as they're talking, they might say, um, you don't understand how I feel. Or they may say, hey, I'd like for you to just take a moment and get a grip. I'd like for you to feel what I'm feeling. I'd like for you to understand the emotions that I'm going through right now. I'm trying to get a grip on this. I'm trying to grasp what you're telling me. Excuse
Wow.
me. Because if I can understand, she's a visual learner and I'm an auditory learner, I need to adapt and adjust my style. Because if you are a visual learner, but everything that I do is I talk about is hearing, the two may not resonate as well, even though we can still have a conversation and we can still understand one another. Having that sense, because if it looks good to you, it looks good to me. If it feels good to you, it feels good to me. And if it sounds good to you, then the feedback is it sounds good to me as well. And these are the same way where, just like even when we send text messages, some people will send you these long, drawn out text messages where you may have to scroll up and down your phone. And those are a lot of your visual people. And then you have some that are more auditory. These are the people that like to listen to audiobooks. They may even prefer to give you a voice message as far as a text where you can record the message. And that would be the way that I would respond back to them as well, because I'm adjusting my style of learning, the way that I think, learn, communicate, and comprehend with their style. Because that's one of the quickest ways of building trust and rapport with individuals. Because we tend to speak more, interact, and befriend those that we feel are like us, that there's a likeness, there's a oneness. This individual gets it. And that helps increase that comfort level of being with an individual.
That's so cool. And I was sitting there evaluating in my head, what do I say when I when someone's talking to me? I think I see what you're saying. I think that's what I do. And I think I believe I'm a more visual learner, or hands-on would be the two that I'm most like. But that is so neat. I think, do you evaluate everyone in your life now that this is like your job?
Well, that's a great question, because a lot of people will ask me from time to time, especially when I'm off. They're like, can you turn it off? Or are you always in this mode? And I think when I'm off work, I like to turn it off. However, unfortunately, there may be certain times or situations when I'm out in the general public or where I'm amongst friends, I'll see or hear something that catches my brain or catches my eye, and I say, wait a minute, something seems incongruent. And one of my keynote speeches that I do, I talk about the ABCs of effective communication, which we've already touched on the first one, which is active listening. And so the B is for body language, and then the C is congruency. And so those are the three primary areas that I look for when I'm speaking or interacting with individuals, as far as the active listening component. And then I'm checking out body language, movements, gestures, illustrators. And then the last thing is we're looking for that congruency. But typically I try to leave work at work. But sometimes, unfortunately, when you're just out and about and you might overhear a conversation, or you're talking to someone, you're like, wait a minute, I just saw a nuance there, or I heard something, or I saw something that conflicted with what they just said, which is a good thing, because you think about it, from time to time, you may ask someone, how are you doing today? And they may flash a certain expression across their face, but they tell you, I'm fine. But their body said otherwise, that they weren't fine. So sometimes it's easy to ignore certain things when you don't know. With other officers that I teach and train, or even entrepreneurs, or just even friends, I always tell them, be careful of what you wish for, because once the veil is lifted, you can't unsee what you know. So
I'm not going to lie to you. I'm very gullible, very trusting. So I get taken advantage of, or have been in the past taken advantage of many, many times. I'm not trusting to strangers. I'm trusting to acquaintances and friends. And those are the ones that have done things that were just not trustworthy. And I think it's because they saw how much I trusted them. So they took advantage of the situation. I could see this being so beneficial for someone that had that same issue, because they may be able to actually read someone's genuality, genuineness. So I wouldn't turn it off. I mean, if I had that, I wouldn't turn it off.
Well, and like I said, I actually had a situation the other day where there was a complaint, and they sent me to go speak to this particular individual, and I just let them talk. I let them vent, and they talked and they talked and they talked, and the entire time that they talked, my job was to process keywords that they used, where they would say angry, or this has made me angry, or I'm not understanding this, or even the negative and the positive words. What would really make me excited is if we could do this, or I would be happy if they did that. And so part of my regurgitation towards them is to echo or paraphrase. So let me make sure that I understand you. If we could do this, that would really excite you and make you happy. Absolutely, absolutely. Because see, now I'm using their words and not Rodney's choice of words. Even if they use certain terms, those people down the road, they're really unkind. I'm going to use that same terminology. I understand, as you referenced, you may have some neighbors down the road that aren't really as kind as you would like for them to be. And what happens is these mirror neurons, and the psychology behind that is they're saying this individual gets it. They're paying attention. They're listening to everything that I say. And, I know even with your podcast guests that you have with, especially in the religious aspect, there's a quote out of the Bible where it's out of the book of James, chapter 1, verse 19, where it says, everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. And so I kind of look at that as the red light, yellow light, and green light. And so where we're quick to listen, just that's our red light. Just stop and listen. Take that information and process it. And a lot of times, once again, this is where we have to sometimes train ourselves not to interrupt. Be genuinely concerned and interested in what an individual is telling you. And then slow to speak. Now, this is our caution light. And then slow to become angry. As words have a lot of power, and sometimes the words that people use in a negative or positive sense towards us, those you have to ask yourself, when someone says you're this and they use a derogatory term and that word deeply affects you, there's a root cause to that problem somewhere. And the question is, what is making that individual hold on to that? That could be something from when they were 5 years old that a family member or a friend or a bully from school used to say to them, and they held on to that. And so, where we talk about being slow to anger, this is where we have to take time before we actually open our mouths and speak to individuals, because we need to be mindful of the words that we use, because we don't want to offend anyone, because words can be very, very sharp tools that can cut an individual deep. And so I thought about that as you were talking about some things, and as I was talking, where we say everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and then slow to become angry. And part of that, once again, is that active listening process and learning not to interrupt.
Yeah, that's perfect. Especially in this episode, that is a very good one to use. When we talk about de-escalation, well, before we jump into that, we said active listening was the first one that we discussed. And then your B, what was that again?
That's body language, where we're
Body language.
actually looking at illustrators and certain aspects of the face and gestures and movements that an individual is producing.
What are some positive body language movements that someone can do to portray that they truly are interested in what is being said?
One of the first things that I have always tried to do is, when I'm sitting with someone, leaning forward slightly, especially if we're seated, slightly leaning forward. And when I talk, I want my palms to be upward, open hands. And as we move our hands, you want to move your hands in slow movements as you're talking, because where I found some people will talk with their hands and they may be really choppy. And for some individuals that may have a lot of anxiety, this can make people nervous when they're, and the next thing that I did when I went down there, to some people, they may say, oh my God, it's starting to become irritating to me, or they're starting to give me anxiety to the way that they're moving and they're getting in my face and they're jumpy. And so as when we talk about different things as far as other individuals, one of the first things about body language is that most of us are not aware of is our own self-awareness. Most of the time we're too busy judging others and talking about and looking at the things that they do, but we don't realize what we're doing because we can't see ourselves directly. And so this is where even just practicing in front of a mirror, using those open palms, leaning forward, having that eye contact from anywhere between 3 to about 5 seconds before we need to take a break away, because we don't want to give that creep factor and just start staring at someone, as though we're watching a horror movie. So there's even studies that show that after 9 seconds, it starts to get a little bit uncomfortable for either party. And this is even why when we're having conversations with people, you'll see even the speaker look away for a second and then they'll come back. And it's just that break of eye contact to help ease the tension and the comfort. And one of the areas that we want to look at as far as the body language is just above the eyebrows down to the bottom of the chin. This is what we call the social zone. And so what you may want to do is move your gaze from like the left eye to the right eye down to the lips while you're talking, because it gives that more natural appeal. Because a lot of people really don't feel comfortable looking at other people directly in the eye. So two of the biggest things that I would say is leaning in and giving engagement. And when you talk, use slow, fluid movements and open palms towards the individual, because giving palms down is more of a directive. And we definitely don't want to use knife hands or finger pointing directly in an individual's face, because this can come off as accusatory or I'm demanding that you do something. When we talk about body language, one thing that I'd like to briefly mention is, as I'm training others, I like to tell them that when we're first born, we don't even know what language is. We don't speak a language. We have to learn a language. But the first language that we learn is body language, nonverbal communication. Our parents, any parents out there know, what do? We smile at our children. We make these funny faces. And children are discerning this. They make a smile, we smile back at them. They make a frown, we might make a frown with them. Oh, poor baby, what's going on? And so these children, they learn to communicate through body language first, because it can take we're talking years before a child even learns to effectively communicate. But what I've seen is once we start to learn to communicate in whatever respective language or languages that we choose, for whatever reason, we tend to put the body language on the back burner, and we trust more of the words that people say as opposed to what body language is actually revealing.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's funny you mentioned the eye contact. So I don't know if I shared this with you or not, but I'm autistic, and eye contact is something that's always been very difficult. But my parents were super strict on, if you better look me in the eye when I'm talking to you.
Right.
So that was something learned. And now I literally count in my head seconds. Like I don't time it like 1, 2, 3. I feel out to where it's timing, but it's the way I feel. And then I'll look away. So I'm still making the eye contact, but then I get to a point where I'm like, okay, that's enough. And I'll turn and look, and it's conscious, like it's not subconscious. But I've been told that I can come off very intimidating, because sometimes when I want someone to know that I'm listening to them, I don't break eye contact.
Yeah.
So I've been trying to work on that, but I thought that was pretty funny when you brought that up.
Yeah, because it almost, like I said, for some, it may come across as that creep factor, or almost like, man, this person is looking at me and they're not breaking eye contact. They're not blinking. What is going on? I'm starting to feel a little bit uncomfortable, but it's almost like a hypnotic trance. And that's why another aspect of different things, and this is more of a psychological aspect, especially in an interviewing or interrogation standpoint, where we look for blink rate in an individual. You think about it, when you're watching a movie and there's a climatic part in that movie, and it's the final fight, or the bomb is about to go off in the next 30 seconds or what have you, where are people at? They're like this, they're glued, and they don't even blink. Their eyes are fixated and they're focused. And that just goes to show genuine interest. Whereas opposed to a lot of times when individuals, for some of the aspects of what we may do in certain investigations, a lot of rapid eye blinking may show that there's a bit of a cognitive overload, and that a person is either processing a lot of information or they're trying to create a lot of information, which could be indicative of some aspects of deception, because the brain is working it's faster than it can almost process the information to be able to get it out. there's an actual video where there was an individual by the name of Chris Watts. He was responsible for murdering his wife and his children. And there's an aspect of where a neighbor has a law enforcement officer in the house, and he's saying that I have cameras in my house. And there's a part where Chris Watts puts his hand on his head, and he just kind of looks off in the distance, and his eyes are just rapidly blinking. And I could only imagine that he was under the impression that it was going to be shown of him bringing his wife and his children out of this house. But that rapid eye blinking is also another sign of cognitive overload versus, like I said, once we're talking about something or engaged. And it's not hard for anyone to actually be put into a trance. You could be walking out of a grocery store and you see something that you've never seen, and that novelty being something that you've never seen, that you may not ever see again, or something that catches your eye. What do? We're like, we track it and we gaze, and the eye doesn't want to blink or close because we want to capture as much of that information as we can. So just like you said, you're doing it more on a conscious level, but once again, it goes back to almost what some could say even a childhood trauma. But what I had to also learn, because I was told you want to be respectful and you look people in the eye. But as I got to dealing with different cultures, I had to understand that not everyone is going to look me in the eye. Some people in their culture, they have to keep their heads down because it is a form of disrespect if they do it. So that's also another aspect of knowing your target audience and who you're speaking to, and then recognizing their baseline. And so when I say baseline, what I mean is, what is their norm in a normal or relaxed state or atmosphere? Do they have certain tweaks, or do they have certain twitches about them that they do that as every time someone talks, if they always talk and they say, oh yeah, and at the beginning of every sentence, they, oh yeah, that will be their norm. And so once you recognize that, it's just, that is their norm. It's nothing out of the way. It's nothing devious. It's nothing deceptive. That's just who they are. It's a part of them.
Okay. What is the C in your ABCs?
You said what was the C?
Mm-hmm.
The C is the congruency. And the congruency is a combination of the active listening as well as the body language. So are the words that are being presented and the body language that's being presented that you physically see in front of you, do they calculate and do they equal 100%? So in other words, if I were to look and I were to see someone and I say, Amber, the shirt you're wearing, I love that. It's beautiful. Now, we recognize moving our head left and right usually as a negative. But the words that I just spoke contradicted that, because I said, I love that. Now, if you're not paying attention, and if we were watching something on silent and you were to just see me move my head, you would probably say he either just said no about something or something negative. He's pushing something. He's hesitant to accept something. It's just like if you were to say, would you like cream in your coffee? And I say no. That is congruent. The words out of my mouth with the movement is congruent. It's when we start to see the lack of congruency. When you hear people say, oh my God, this was just so horrible. I was so afraid of my life and I didn't know what I was going to do. But there's no crying, there's no actual tears, and not everyone will always produce, tears. But how is their recovery time? Because the average person, when they're crying or when they're upset, it's not like a polite smile, or a genuine smile. When we genuinely think about things, we get that smile on our face and we're like, man, I tell you, I remember Coach such and such, or I remember this. And it takes a while for it to diminish. Whereas if it's a polite smile, individuals may look at you and say, hi, nice to meet you. And then as soon as before you can even walk away, it's gone. So we look at those levels of congruency with what you've heard. How did the body's body language, how did it align? Did the gestures, did the movements, in addition with the words, did they show 100% level of congruency, or is there a little bit of inaccuracy that you may want to go back and revisit to actually see maybe there's something a little bit more where I could ask some more questions. Did that make sense the way I broke that down?
That does make sense. And when you said you wanted to see the congruency in the body language and what they're saying, the very first thing to pop in my head before you did it was someone answering a question in a positive, but shaking their head in a negative. Because that's usually what I've heard is a telltale that someone is not being completely honest.
And it can be. However, the caveat to that is, once again, listening to what they said as a totality. Because if I were to say, Coach Johnson, man.
Oh, right. Yeah.
He was a wonderful man. I man, words can't describe how I felt about him. Now, I'm saying that this was a wonderful man, but I'm shaking my head no. And then I follow that up with, I can't think of the words, or words can't describe. Now we're seeing congruency because the brain cannot come up with the logical way of saying what is really wanting to be stated out of that individual's brain. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. It absolutely does. And I think back to times that I've done the same thing, and it usually has to do with maybe like I just had a death in the family. And during that time, people do tend to shake their heads because they're so distraught and disappointed, but they're saying those positive things. So that makes sense to me.
Yes.
Yeah, in that aspect, it does make sense. So
this is why it's very, very important, because it's almost that disbelief where the brain can't comprehend what's happened. The brain can't comprehend of what to say in that particular circumstance and situation. So it's searching as long as, and it's still working along with the word. So, because if you were to ask a follow-up question, that's where you're going to get more of a direct answer. And then you start measuring that level of information that you're receiving as far as those gestures and those words and so on and so forth.
Okay. So communication, we kind of went over that a little bit. Let's talk about some de-escalation.
Absolutely.
So we have, different relationships. We have family relationships. We have friendships. We have coworkers. That's a professional relationship. And then we have romantic relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Are there different, I guess, let me see. Are there different ways to de-escalate based on the relationship you're dealing in, or is the de-escalation pretty much the same across the board?
From my experiences, what I see, because people are people, every situation may have a different title, but people are still people. And so when you maintain a level of understanding, say, for example, I've gone to a number of domestics, and once again, we go back to that active listening. Everyone they want to be able to speak their piece, whether it's a domestic violence, even with a child that may want to go outside and play, and a parent has said no, and then the child throws the temper tantrum. The child wants to state their case as to why they feel they should be able to do it. But what happens when the parent says, that's it, that's the end of the story, we're not talking about this anymore, we're done. Well, they feel like my voice has been cut off. And so once again, I go back to that platform of active listening. I've been on calls before, and even especially as a rookie officer, you go in and you might just start throwing handcuffs on the male because you feel that this individual was probably the aggressor, especially if there's certain signs of physical harm. And people will even tell you, oh, so you're not even going to listen to me. You're not even going to take a statement from me. You don't want to hear anything that I have to say. Well, they feel that their voice has been stripped away from them. In levels of de-escalation, I found that our tone of voice is very, very important of how we come across to individuals. If I get out of my patrol car, even in an argument, whether it's with a friend or a family member or a significant other, and I get out, and the more that I start to raise my voice, what does the other person want to do? They raise their voice as well. But if, once again, that self-awareness, if I get out and everyone's arguing and I say, hey, let me get everyone's attention. Can we just bring it down just a little bit? We get individuals separated because, once again, this person wants to have their say, this person wants to have their say. So once again, we go back to that active listening, being able to let this individual say what they want to say, even if it's the kid with the candy bar. When we talk about de-escalation, think about hostage negotiation, which I've taken some training in hostage negotiation. Persuasion and negotiation are not one and the same. Persuasion, first and foremost, is trying to get an individual to do something that they have not yet thought of or would not typically do to begin with. Negotiation will take place after that, after persuasion has been successful. And negotiation means you're about to get what you want, I'm about to get what I want. And so usually that's where a lot of the de-escalation is needed in relationships, because our arguments always seem to be one-sided. It's going to be what's beneficial for me, not so much for you. And both parties want something that's beneficial for them. So being able to listen and then being able to give that feedback, once again, that echoing or that paraphrasing. So if I'm understanding you correctly, you're upset because I didn't wash the dishes before I left and went to go to work today. Because you think about some of the arguments that we may have had with friends, family, significant others, or whomever. The thing that we hear them arguing about is usually not the big argument. It's usually something else. That's just the tip of the iceberg that finally set it off.
Yes.
It's usually something else. You know, when you say, well, what's going on here? Well, they never let me do this. They never let me do that. I can't use my phone. I can't do this. But the argument that actually blew everything up was because they didn't eat all the dinner on their plate. You know, something along those lines. And it's just been tension building up and building up and building up. It's very interesting that, you know, even communication in the workplace, that is one of the main reasons why so many people want to leave their jobs, because they feel like I have no voice. When I talk to my boss or when I talk to my coworkers, no one's listening to me. Same thing in relationships. I believe that there was a study done by, there's an association of the American Academy of Matrimonial Lawyers, and they said that 67.5% of all marriages fail due to communication.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's a very, very high number. 67.5% of all marriages fail because of a breakdown in communication. And I think especially communication and de-escalation, when we know someone, a lot of times we expect them to know because they know me, or I know you, you know. So you know better. You know I don't like this. You know that upsets me. You know how to push my buttons. No one knows how to push your buttons better than a loved one.
Yeah.
So that's why I say they know the right words to say to spark that nerve or to touch that nerve and to get things. But in regard to de-escalation, the very first thing that we always have to do is go back to that active listening, that 80-20 rule, giving an individual the opportunity to speak their 80% and you respond with your 20%. And we hope to reciprocate that. Because you think about it, whenever couples go to marriage counselors or any type of counselor, or when the police show up on the scene for a domestic, someone is the referee because they can't referee for themselves. And what has to happen is we have to get them to a point where they can start to communicate together without interrupting, without stepping on each other's toes, without raising their voices, by bringing those temperaments and that tonality and ridding of the emotions. It's okay to express the emotions because we're emotional beings, but being able to take the time that we need. As I just sat there and thought again, I remembered a verse from Proverbs 15 verses 1 and 2, where it references a soft answer turneth away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger. So in other words, calming your tone can disarm aggression. It's hard to really yell at someone that's not yelling back at you. And as you keep talking in that calm voice, eventually they're going to come down, because just like a tea kettle, eventually the steam, once the tea kettle gets heated up and the water starts to boil, it's going to blow the steam out. And as it keeps blowing steam, the water's getting lower and it's not going to have any more steam left to blow. And then verse 2 talks about the tongue of the wise uses knowledge aright, but out of the mouth of fools poureth out foolishness. So as we talk and we reciprocate, we listen, this is where it should display and demonstrate our wisdom of understanding. I realize I made you upset. I didn't realize that I was doing this. I appreciate you for sharing me. And we have to acknowledge our wrongdoings. We have to acknowledge, I think a lot of times, especially in jobs, in the workplace, even in relationships, sometimes we don't acknowledge and praise those around us for doing good deeds. And sometimes that's all people really want to hear. Just, hey, son, thank you for taking the trash out today. I know it was raining this morning. I really appreciate you doing that. But a lot of times that's what you're supposed to do. But sometimes it's good to hear that, just that acknowledgement to be able to be produced to you. It doesn't hurt to give anyone kind words.
No, I agree. I think that people don't give kind words enough. So I try to make a real effort. Like if I see someone, as an example, when I see someone that I think is attractive, I don't mean sexually, I just mean they're an attractive person, or someone that's dressed really nice, I'll be like, man, that suit looks sharp on you. Right. Or I'll say, man, that dress looks so beautiful on you. Or you're a gorgeous person. Like I'll just say that. And you can tell that some people are like, whoa, like they don't understand why I'm telling them that, but I can't help it. Like, I think that if it's a positive thing, we don't need to keep that in. We need to say it more often. And because I'm that way, my daughter, and I'll remember this for the rest of my life, when she was 4 years old, we were at a Target and there was a nice, lovely Black lady coming out. It looked like she had just come from church. And you know how a lot of them wear very nice hats and a beautiful dress. She was dressed to the nines. And my daughter yelled from across the parking lot, "You're gorgeous. You're gorgeous." That made that lady's day.
Oh,
And I
yeah.
was so proud. I was so proud. And ever since then, my daughter, I have 5 children, but this particular daughter, I guess, is when I started to really do these things when she was
Hmm.
young. So she picked up on it. So now she tells everyone, she's like, "You're gorgeous." Like, so I love it. I think that positivity, like taking the trash out, you did a really good job. And I really appreciate that effort.
Hmm.
Um, it needs to be more of a common goal for us and a common thing that we do, because when we do positive comments, it makes the positive things grow. When we
Exactly.
only do those negative comments, that negativity does grow in that person. So always pour into someone in the most positive way that you can. I think is very important and needed.
Yeah, you think about certain suicide calls or certain things. If those individuals picked the phone up to tell someone that they were about to kill themselves, they obviously had something that they needed to be said. And once again, I need someone to listen.
Mhm.
Uh, the fact that they have picked up the phone and called to say this, and to be able to stay on the phone and keep communicating and talking betters our chances of getting someone off that ledge. Even in relationships, even in jobs, when someone says, "I'm thinking about quitting, I'm sick of this job," once again, same or similar, the circumstances are not exactly the same, but what's going on in that individual's mind is they're going through a crisis. And the only way that people will want to talk, as I mentioned earlier, people will only want to talk to you and provide information if they trust you or they respect you, to the
Mhm.
point that the information I'm about to tell you and I'm about to share with you, I I feel that you're going to safeguard it or you're going to do the right thing with it to help me get through this particular circumstance and situation. And that's a lot of times in certain aspects of what we do in our job, whether I'm doing a polygraph examination or if I'm interviewing a suspect, a victim, or a witness. I can't say, well, hey, let's just come back in about another week or so and we'll revisit this. Sometimes those things demand a lot of vital information in a short amount of time. And the way that we have to do that is we have to build a lot of trust and rapport in that short amount of time. You think about it, even with relationships, most people, after meeting their significant other or potential partner, after a conversation, typically within the first 5 to 15 minutes, most individuals have a pretty good idea if their continued interest will continue to blossom after that first date or that first
Mhm.
interaction. And
Yeah.
it's, can I trust this person? Can I talk to this person? Are they giving me good feedback, or did they just sit there the whole night and not open their mouth and say anything at all? And respectfully, we have to understand and respect that not everyone is a talker. Some people are very introverted, uh, as opposed to some people are extroverted. So once again, baselining an individual and first finding out, man, this person doesn't talk much. They're very, very quiet. But we all have different things in common that we can all talk about. A good buddy of mine, he's a former military interrogator, and he's always said, things that we have in common, places, things, and food, amongst a few things. We all like to eat. We all like, there are different places that we may have been or would like to go to. Um, so we can find a common ground in just about anything if you can actually spark that person's interest to be able to get them to open up. Once they start to open up, it's our job be aware of our own self-awareness, just like we talked about the leaning in and engagement, the open palms, eyebrow flashes as people are talking. The eyebrow flash shows that we're interested. as you may be talking or the other person may be talking. Oh, really? You don't even have to say, oh, really? Just the eyebrow flash leaning in, maybe even a slight head tilt. We see that even with our animals. Sometimes when they hear a noise and it piques their interest, the first thing they may do is turn their head. It shows that you've said something that has sparked my curiosity. So I'm willing to listen a little bit further.
Yeah. Well, I loved this. I think that you gave a lot of good information. The ABCs are amazing and easy to remember. And then the de-escalation portion, going back to the A, active listening, just to de-escalate can be very helpful. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us before we close out?
I think a lot of times we take for granted the understanding and the reciprocity with others. I think a lot of times we expect people to treat us certain ways, but we may not always give it back. And just like you said with your daughter and how you do a kind word or kind words, it doesn't cost anything, and it may just make someone's day. I would say that when we go into conversations, especially those difficult conversations where we might be going into an argument, excuse me, be mindful of our tone, be mindful of our emotions, of how we may be coming across. Because if I sit there and I'm rolling my eyes and I'm crossing my arms and I'm sitting back and I'm showing that I'm disengaged, well, we're probably escalating our situation. So some of the key aspects that I will always tell everyone is start being mindful of your awareness as well. What is it that I'm doing that may be elevating this person versus what is it that I'm doing to help de-escalate any and all situations that I have interacted in?
And I think for our listeners that may find themselves in situations that need de-escalation, it does take self-awareness and practice. It's not something that comes very naturally because we can get riled up, we can get in our emotions so easily. So it does take that self-awareness and really a conscious effort to de-escalate a situation in a really good way, I think.
Absolutely. And like I said, a lot of times, if you really want to know what you feel you're doing good and what you're doing bad, ask someone that you trust to tell you the truth and take that self-criticism. Hey, the other night when we had an argument, what was it that I said that upset you? What is it that I did that you felt that I did well in our conversation? How is it you would like for me to communicate with you so that I don't upset you? And this is how I would like for you to communicate with me. We have home court advantage when it's someone that we're familiar with, because it's easier to speak to that person on an open level versus someone that we have no idea. When we're dealing with someone that we have no idea, we have to try to figure out, what did I just say? What did I just do? And now how can I fix this in a matter of seconds without destroying this trust and this rapport that I may or may not have already been able to establish? So I think we have home court advantage a lot of times with our friends and families and loved ones, co-workers, people that we see and know on a daily basis. Ask them, but be prepared for the constructive criticism. And those are the things that we definitely want to look at and seek to try to modify and change and adjust. And as you just said, it's not always going to be easy, because we've been doing this particular way for so many years and it's worked. And a lot of times our defense mechanisms is what has allowed us to get where we are now, to not be harmed. We go into survival mode. I have to raise my voice so that these people stay away from me and so that they don't hurt me. And I don't feel like putting my guard down, because every time I put my guard down, I get hurt. So I'm always keeping my defense systems up. But we have to learn that when we're around people that we love and that we can trust and rapport, that's not as necessary as we think it is. So self-awareness is a huge key.
I think that's a very good thing to do, ask someone close to you for feedback. And then if you aren't able to give that self-awareness to yourself, or you just want to see if it's on par with what you're thinking, to ask that person and see if you're on point. Yeah. Okay. Well, I really appreciate you being here today. This was a fun conversation, and hopefully our listeners enjoyed it as well. So thank you for being on and taking the time to do this. Yeah. For our listeners, if you guys want to get a hold of Rodney, so you said you wrote a book, right? Or a book or two?
Yes.
Okay. So if you give me that link, I can put that link in our description of the video and the audio for people to be able to get to it. And if anyone wants to get in contact with me, or you think that you would like to try and be a guest on our podcast, just reach out to me at boundbygracepodcast@gmail.com. All right. Thank you guys so much again. And you guys have a wonderful night. Bye.